Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at something that's been in the news quite a bit lately, the filibuster.
Yes, the filibuster.
So picture this, right? A lone senator standing on the Senate floor, talking for hours and hours just to block a bill they don't like.
Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it?
It does.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like a, pirate holding a ship hostage.
That's not a coincidence. That's actually where the term comes from. And today we're going to dive into the history of this political maneuver and how it's evolved over the years.
From those dramatic standoffs you mentioned to its impact on civil rights, this is going to be a fascinating deep dive, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're enjoying these deep dives, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes.
Now, I got to say, I'm really intrigued by the filibuster. It seems like more than just boring procedural stuff.
Oh, it is.
It's really about power and strategy and, some pretty crazy moments in the Senate.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how something so central to American politics wasn't actually part of the original plan.
Really. I always assumed it was something the Founding Fathers put in there to protect minority viewpoints.
It's a common misconception, but in reality, it emerged almost by accident. Back in 1806, the Senate decided to get rid of a rule that allowed them to end debate.
So they kind of accidentally created this powerful tool.
They did. And to make things even more interesting, Aaron Burr, the guy who shot Alexander Hamilton, he was actually instrumental in this.
Oh, wow. Small world, huh?
Yeah, in one of his last acts as vice president, he suggested removing this rule to streamline things. He had no idea what he was unleashing.
Unintended consequences, right? So if there was no way to stop a senator from talking for most of the 1800s, were these early filibusters just nonstop speeches?
You'd think so, but they were actually pretty rare. The Senate was much smaller back then, more collaborative.
So it wasn't this political weapon it is today.
Exactly. But that started to change around the 1840s as the country grew and political parties solidified.
I see. So that's when it really started to be used more strategically.
Exactly, as a way for the minority to delay or obstruct legislation.
But when did the term filibuster actually come about?
It popped up in the mid-1800s, and it's not a coincidence that it was compared to pirates holding ships hostage.
Because a senator could hold a bill hostage by talking endlessly.
Exactly.
It's a really powerful image, right? And as we move into the 20th century, the filibuster gets even more interesting, especially when we look at the fight for civil rights.
Absolutely. That's when it really takes center stage.
So how did the filibuster impact that struggle for equality?
Well, Southern senators who were fiercely opposed to racial equality, they used it to block any legislation that threatened Jim Crow.
Wow, so a procedural tactic used to uphold injustice. It's hard to believe.
It was a dark chapter, and the filibuster played a big role in delaying progress. For example, the fight for anti-lynching laws.
I remember reading about that. There was so much public support, but it was constantly blocked.
Right. Southern senators used the filibuster to kill those bills. A 1922 New York Times headline even said, "Filibuster kills anti-lynching bill."
That's powerful and really sad.
Yeah, it shows how the filibuster could be used to thwart the will of the majority on basic human rights.
Of course, the fight for civil rights continued.
Yeah.
Did the filibuster keep being a problem?
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge point of contention. And when you talk about the filibuster and civil rights, you got to talk about Strom Thurmond.
Yeah. His record-breaking filibuster against the Civil Rights Act of 1957, he talked for over 24 hours straight, right?
He did, over 24 hours and 18 minutes. To prepare, he even took these long steam baths to dehydrate himself so he wouldn't have to use the bathroom.
Wow, that's dedication.
It was quite the performance. But here's the thing. It was mostly symbolic. He didn't actually have the votes to block the bill.
So more political theater than a real obstacle.
Exactly. But the fight over the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that was different. Southern senators filibustered for 54 days.
54 days. That's incredible.
It was a brutal battle, but eventually the Civil Rights Act passed a huge victory. But those intense filibusters showed that something needed to change.
Which leads us to 1975 and the change to the cloture rule, right?
Right. They lowered the threshold to end a filibuster from 2/3 to 3/5 or 60 votes.
So instead of needing 67 senators, they only needed 60. That's still a lot, but it was a step.
It was an attempt to make it a bit easier to overcome those procedural hurdles.
And that's the system we have today. 60 votes to end a filibuster.
You got it.
Yep.
However, there's a twist. Despite this change, filibusters have become even more common in recent decades.
Wait, really? I thought the change in 75 was supposed to make them less frequent. What happened?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's gone from a rarely used tool to a constant feature of our politics.
So it's not just a relic of the past.
Nope, it's very much alive, and a key part of modern political battles.
Which brings us to the nuclear option, right? The one that could kill the filibuster for good.
That's right. The nuclear option lets the Senate get rid of the filibuster with a simple majority, 51 votes.
That's a pretty extreme measure, isn't it? Like breaking glass in case of emergency?
It is, and it's already been used for judicial nominations.
Right back in 2013 when Democrats got frustrated with Republicans blocking Obama's nominees.
Exactly. And then in 2017, Republicans expanded it to Supreme Court nominees, too.
So both parties have used it to their advantage. It sounds kind of risky.
It is. It's had a huge impact on the courts. Both Trump and Biden were able to appoint a lot of judges because of it.
It makes you wonder what would happen if the nuclear option was used for all legislation.
That's a big question. A lot of experts believe it's only a matter of time before that happens.
Wow, so you think the filibuster's days are numbered?
It's hard to say for sure, but with the way politics are going and how polarized things are, well, it wouldn't be surprising. As Senator Richard Shelby put it, you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube.
So basically he's saying there's no going back. We've changed things too much.
That's one way to look at it.
Yep.
And honestly, I think he might be right. With how divided things are in Washington and how much pressure there is to get things done, I think eventually one party will just pull the trigger and get rid of the filibuster entirely.
Wow, that would be a huge change for the Senate, wouldn't it? I mean, what would that even look like?
Imagine a Senate where anything could pass with a simple majority. It would definitely speed things up, but would that be a good thing? It's a tough question. On one hand, it could mean an end to all the gridlock we've seen, but on the other hand, it would give a lot of power to whichever party is in control.
It's like a trade-off, isn't it?
Mhm.
More efficiency but less compromise.
Exactly. It's something we need to think carefully about, because without the filibuster, the minority party would have very little power to slow things down or force any kind of negotiation.
It's almost a little scary to think about.
It is. It's a big decision with a lot of potential consequences, both good and bad. Ultimately, it's up to the senators to decide what they want the future of the Senate to be.
Well, we've certainly learned a lot about the filibuster today, haven't we? From its accidental origins to its impact on civil rights to its potential demise, it's been quite a journey.
It really makes you think about the balance of power in our government, doesn't it? How do we make sure things can get done while also protecting the rights of those who don't agree with the majority? It's a complicated question, and the filibuster is right at the heart of it.
Absolutely. And what's so fascinating is that even after all these years, there's still no easy answer. The debate goes on. So what do you think? Is the filibuster a relic of the past that's holding us back? Or is it a crucial protection against tyranny? There are valid arguments on both sides, and it's something we each need to grapple with as we think about the future of our democracy.
It's a question we can't ignore.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of the filibuster. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, it's a powerful image, right? Once that toothpaste is out, you can't really put it back in.
He's basically saying, we've opened Pandora's box, and now we have to deal with the consequences.
I think that's a fair interpretation. And to be honest, the more I think about it, the more I agree with him.
You really think the filibuster is on its way out?
I think it's a real possibility. The political climate, the desire for action, and the precedents set by both parties. It all points in that direction.
Wow, that's a pretty big deal. It really makes you wonder what the Senate would look like without it.
It's hard to say for sure. Some people argue that it would make things more efficient, allow Congress to actually get things done.
That's definitely appealing, especially after all the gridlock we've seen lately.
Yeah.
But are there downsides to consider?
Oh, absolutely. Without the filibuster, the majority party could basically do whatever they wanted. There would be very little to stop them.
That's a little concerning. It's all about balance, isn't it? Making sure the government can function, but also protecting the rights of the minority.
Exactly. It's a fundamental challenge of any democracy. And the filibuster, for all its flaws, has been a part of that balance for a long time.
It really makes you think.
Mm.
So we've gone from its accidental beginnings to its role in shaping American history, and now we're talking about its potential end. It's been quite a journey.
It has, and it highlights how our political institutions are always evolving. What worked in the past might not work in the present, and the choices we make today will have a lasting impact.
That's a great point. So if you had to pick one key takeaway about the filibuster, what would it be?
I think the most important thing to remember is that it's more than just a rule. It's a reflection of our values, our struggles, and our ongoing debate about how to balance power in a democracy. It's a debate that every generation has to have.
That's a really powerful message. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. What kind of Senate do you want to see? Do you think the filibuster is a vital safeguard or an obstacle to progress? There's no easy answer, and it's a question we all need to think about as we shape the future of our nation.
It's a question worth asking.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration of the filibuster. And to all our listeners out there, keep those minds engaged and keep asking those tough questions. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.